everyone. We are back. Yes, it is I, Kenneth the K-Rock Klein, coming to you with episode 54 of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock. That's right, the podcast where things are getting hot around in the sports world and in my incredibly, sometimes overrated, but incredibly underachieving thoughts of yours truly, Kenneth the K-Rock Klein. And folks, I know I said earlier it was hot, but folks, I gotta be real honest with you. There's nothing hot going on right now because as of right now, I am hunkered down in my apartment. And there's a reason why I am hunkered down in my apartment. And well, let me allow a few people from an old classic 1954 classic musical tell you why I'm hunkered down.
Snow, 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 snow. It won't be long before we'll all be there with snow.
Snow, snow. I want to wash my hands, my face, and hair with snow.
That's right, folks. It is snowing in Beaumont, Texas. Can you believe that? Folks, I gotta be real honest with you. It's snowing in Beaumont. It's snowing around the entire Gulf Coast. I mean, Houston's getting it. New Orleans is getting it. My goodness gracious. I mean, look, it's not like this is the first time I've ever seen snow. I've been around snowy spots. I mean, I used to go skiing when I was a young kid. We would go up to Colorado, Utah, Arizona to ski, although I stopped doing that when I was a young kid after I conquered my biggest obstacle of a mountain that had given me trouble. And when I finally accomplished that goal, when I finally conquered it, I said, yep, I'm done skiing. I've done everything I can with skiing and all that. But I've been through snowy situations. As a matter of fact, when I was in Marshall, Texas, I was caught up in the big freeze. I was stuck in my apartment building at the time, and it was a first floor apartment compared to this one, which is now on the second floor. But I was in my first floor apartment in Marshall. I was trapped in my apartment for a week or so, and ended up having to have the company of Tom and Jerry, Scooby-Doo, and the Impractical Jokers, because that was the only thing that was playing on that I was really caught up and interested at the time. And then there were other few shows, that ones I could find, but so I was kind of trapped into big freeze and snow. And then, funny story, just let me tell you this real fast. Funny story. So my knee, years ago I had knee surgery, and my knee was acting up again. And I figured, well, it's probably because I was worried that it was bothering me again, that there was something wrong. I couldn't move around on it. So my mom calls. I call my mom and I tell her, hey, here's the situation with my knee. And she's like, well, okay, do this. I want you to warm up a towel, like one of those hand towels. Just warm it up in a microwave and, put it on your knee just to keep it composure. So I said, okay, sure, I'll keep it calm and do that. So first couple of times, nothing happened. Nothing wrong happened and everything was fine. But then on this one particular time, I put it in a microwave and I just let it continue to go. And then all of a sudden I happened to glance in the microwave. The towel was on fire. The towel was on fire. I was like, oh crap, I got to get it out. So I stopped the microwave and then I got the towel out and it was burning up. It was so on fire. And I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? So I could have just put it in the sink and try to wash it out. But I didn't know if there was water in a sink at that time because the water thing might have been down. So all I could do was do the only thing I could think of, which was to go rush it, take it outside, put it in the snow, and then just, ice it up all over to calm the fire down. And I was able to do that, surprisingly. It didn't burn my hand. But after a while, I picked it up, and then I realized that there was a big hole right in the middle of this hand towel. So I had a burnt out hand towel, for the rest of that time. I don't know what I did with that. I think I might have thrown it away or something, but man, that would have been a nice memorabilia to keep just to show what happens when you stick a hand towel in a microwave. So yeah, I just figured I'd throw that story out there, folks, just to kind of let you know that this isn't my first rodeo with dealing with snow. But anyway, yeah, I'm hunkered down in my apartment now in the snow situation, and yeah, it's been a little bit of a hectic circumstances. This is only my third day here, and hopefully I will get out eventually. I'm going to get out eventually, and once everything calms down. But man, Snow in Beaumont. That is insane. Never thought I would see today when I would see snow in Beaumont, Texas. I've seen snow in Houston before, and then there's been snow all over other places I went to. But, yeah, that's crazy. Kind of crazy how Mother Nature can act up in a certain way. Speaking of acting up in a certain way, folks, we got some interesting sports topics that I want to get my thoughts on. Today we're going to be talking about the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. They have officially announced 3 new members will be joining Cooperstown. I'm talking Ichiro Suzuki, CC Sabathia, and my man, Billy Wagner. I'll get into all the details on that in just a moment. Just kind of my thoughts in particular about this Hall of Fame class and, why they are very deserving of it. And then, of course, I'm going to be talking about a little controversy with regards to the voting ballot as well. And speaking of controversy, we got to be honest, folks. I mean, look, AFC divisional playoff game, Chiefs-Texans, didn't go the Texans' way, but we got to talk about this whole narrative about the refs and how this is really hurting the Chiefs team, because we know how great the Chiefs team is, but this narrative is really hurting them in more ways than one. And we're also going to be talking about the AFC Championship game between the Bills and the Chiefs, and also the Eagles and the Commanders. That is an interesting NFC Championship matchup. So we're going to be talking about that. I'm going to be giving out my predictions for who I think is going to be in the Super Bowl. So stay tuned, folks. We're going to step aside. When we come back, we're going to talk a little baseball first up. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. Folks, we are officially back, and let's get down to our first segment. So Tuesday, they officially announced the newest members of the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, which is a yearly tradition as well. And this is a class that did have some names that, probably should have gone into Hall of Fame as well, but there have been some clouds of distrust, scandal, controversies attached to it and everything. So but yeah, clearly everybody knew that there was going to be one player that was going to go into the Hall of Fame, and that, of course, was Ichiro Suzuki. And look, there's no question about it. He has been one of the most beloved baseball players of all time in his career. I mean, when you look at the career that Ichiro Suzuki had, he was born in Japan. In fact, he's the first Japanese-born player in a major league, in the Hall of Fame. And when you look at his career, in Japan, when he played professional baseball there, he had a .353 career batting average, 1,278 hits, 118 home runs, and 529 RBIs. And man, one more stolen base, he would have had 200 in his career. So then, Ichiro becomes a well-liked player in Japan that everybody, including Major League Baseball, is starting to take notice of him. And before you know it, in 2001, he joins the Seattle Mariners, and that season was a really special year for the Mariners. Not only did Ichiro Suzuki win the Rookie of the Year award, but he also was named the league's most valuable player in the American League. I mean, that's insane. Like a rookie being named the MVP of an entire league. I mean, I'm sure he would have been MVP of all of baseball that year. Barry Bonds, I think, was the NL MVP that season because of his 73 home runs. But I think if you had to be honest, you can make a case that Ichiro had a better year than Barry Bonds, although Bonds had that home run situation. But looking at what Ichiro did that season, he not only was the Rookie of the Year that year, I mean, when you look at it, 242 hits in his rookie season, a .350 batting average, and 56 stolen bases. And, he had hitting streaks of 25 and 23 games. I mean, that's almost half of what Joe DiMaggio did in that 1941 season when he had a 56-game hitting streak. So clearly, Ichiro Suzuki had a great year. In fact, that year, Seattle also won 116 games, the most ever wins in the history of baseball in a single season. Unfortunately for them, they didn't get to the World Series And, they lost to the Yankees that year, and that, of course, set up the incredible World Series between the Yankees and the Arizona Diamondbacks. But, man, that was a great year for Seattle fans. And then, of course, throughout the rest of his career, when you look at Ichiro's numbers, there is no question that he deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. 10-time All-Star, AL MVP, 10-time Gold Glove Award winner, 3-time Silver Slugger Award winner, 2-time AL batting champion. One of those was actually in the 01 season. And then he also has the Major League record for most hits in a single season with 262. A remarkable achievement for a player of that caliber. It's just unfortunate that he never got to experience playing in a World Series. But that's the thing with baseball. There have been so many great players that have made big impacts in the game, and yet they've never even gotten a taste of what it's like to play in a World Series. You think of guys like Ernie Banks, Ken Griffey Jr., just a few that come off the top of my head. It's just unfortunate, but, baseball doesn't always go in the way that you might say for basketball or for football in a sense. But Ichiro Suzuki was a Hall of Fame player. However, there is a little bit of controversy regarding Ichiro's induction to the Hall of Fame. Now, it is not Ichiro's fault. He did nothing wrong. But one of the biggest things about Hall of Fame voting is that not every player that gets inducted is a unanimous vote. Or there have been more players that have not gotten in unanimously. Only one player in the history of Major League Baseball has been inducted unanimously, and that, of course, is Mariano Rivera, who received all votes from everybody. And Mariano Rivera is arguably the greatest closer in the history of Major League Baseball. But you have to think with all the guys that played baseball that were legends of the game, at least some of them should have been unanimous players. Guys like Nolan Ryan, Tom Seaver, Derek Jeter, guys off the top of my head. Willie Mays should have been a unanimous player. Hank Aaron probably. Babe Ruth. The writers, look, I'm sure every writer that makes a vote, it knows the player's going to go in, but they just don't do it for some reason. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I think the writers need to include a player in a ballot. I think everyone should have voted for Derek Jeter unanimously or Nolan Ryan unanimously, just to name a couple of those players. But the controversy here, one writer who cast a vote for the Hall of Fame ballot decided that Ichiro Suzuki didn't deserve his vote. Now let me break down the Hall of Fame ballot situation here. So when you retire from the game of baseball, you have 5 years before you are allowed to be on the Hall of Fame ballot. Now, in order for you to get inducted to the Hall of Fame, you need to receive 75% of the votes from the writers. And there are a lot of writers. I want to say over 250 of them. You need to receive 75% or more of those votes. So, in a way. And you have 10 years on the ballot. If you receive fewer than 5% of the votes, you're automatically off the ballot because, they don't want to waste time having you on board when they have other players that are coming in that might get better chances to make it to the Hall of Fame than you. But if you don't get in the Hall of Fame, if you are not inducted to the Hall of Fame after 10 years, then you're automatically on the senior ballot. And that's unfortunate for some players that have yet to be inducted to the Hall of Fame. One guy that comes to mind is Dale Murphy, a great player for the Atlanta Braves of the 1980s. But the sad part about it is we all knew Ichiro Suzuki was going to get into the Hall of Fame, and he deserves to be in there. So he got 99% of the vote. Yet, one writer decided, Ichiro Suzuki's not getting my vote. And I'm just like, you have got to be kidding me. Like, how in the world can you not vote for Ichiro Suzuki? How? And a lot of people are wondering who this writer is. Who's this sports reporter or sports writer that had the decency to say, I'm sorry, but I'm not voting for Ichiro? Like, who? A guy like that doesn't have the decency to say Ichiro Suzuki's not getting in the Hall of Fame? Go figure. Why would you not vote for Ichiro Suzuki when everybody else already had their mind made up that he was a first ballot Hall of Famer? It absolutely makes no sense whatsoever. And I'm sorry, the guy that decided to commit this vote, I don't know if he was thinking he was probably going to be the first person or the only person to not vote for Ichiro, but the guy that voted, that decided Ichiro wasn't going to get inducted on his account, I'm sorry, you don't deserve to vote. You need to have your voting rights stripped away. You need to go to like a psychiatric treatment, and you need to write down an essay as to why did you not vote for Ichiro Suzuki. And you have to serve a suspended sentence, maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years, depending on how much of an annoyance you are or how much of an excuse you have to not voting for Ichiro Suzuki. And then if you immediately say, yes, I regret it, then you might have a chance to vote back in. But man, why would you not vote Ichiro Suzuki in? I hope the excuse is because, well, everyone else is going to do it, and I don't think it's fair that he should be unanimous, so let's leave it that way. Okay. Derek Jeter, with all due respect to Ichiro, is probably a more iconic player than Ichiro Suzuki. Derek Jeter. And he didn't get a unanimous vote. Like, Cal Ripken Jr., Tony Gwynn, two beloved figures in baseball, they didn't get a unanimous vote. I just don't understand how we have sports writers that are so clueless or so delusional, so stubborn to not even consider voting for Ichiro Suzuki. And it just really makes me mad to even think about it. Like, I'm losing a lot of respect for the Hall of Fame and the entire process. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I think a lot of fans are very upset and pissed off about it. Not like everybody knows that Ichiro Suzuki is in a Hall of Fame, and I think he probably doesn't care. As long as he gets in, that's totally fine. But, man, don't you think it's fair that we should have somebody else that deserves to be a unanimous player? Like Mariano Rivera, I get and I respect that, but I don't think he should be the only player that is worthy of being a unanimous player. And I think we missed out on a big opportunity there. And it's probably going to take a while before somebody else comes along who has a great career, makes a big impact on the field, and he gets all the votes that should make him a Hall of Fame player, or at least a unanimous Hall of Fame player. But anyways, Ichiro Suzuki is in the Hall of Fame. Now, the second player voted in, of course, CC Sabathia. CC Sabathia, here's a guy that, like, he was a really good pitcher. And he spent 19 years pitching for Cleveland, the Milwaukee Brewers, and the New York Yankees. And, he was second. He actually was in the same rookie class as Ichiro Suzuki. And he actually finished second in the AL Rookie of the Year voting behind Ichiro Suzuki. And he had one of his great years with the Cleveland Indians in 2007. They ended up going to the ALCS. They had a 3-1 series lead against the Red Sox before Boston came back to win that series. But Sabathia ended up winning the Cy Young Award that year. And he ends up going to Milwaukee in 2008, helps lead them to a playoffs. And then he goes to the New York Yankees, and he ends up winning a World Series with them in 2009, and then has, of course, a remarkable 4-year stretch. But, his later career in the Yankees didn't quite end up the way he wanted to. There were some issues with some personal battles with alcoholism and all of that, and he was able to make a comeback from that to get himself, back healthy and able to pitch. But it just didn't quite end up his career the way that he would have liked it. But he did have a really great career. He had a lifetime ERA of 3.74 with 3,093 strikeouts. And, he had 200 innings in a season 8 times in his career. And, with CC Sabathia, there's no question that the guy was an unbelievable pitcher through his career. And you can definitely see that, especially with the teams that he pitched for. When you look at a small marketed team, or I don't want to say small market. Cleveland's not really a small market team. It's more like middle-sized market. It's had some great baseball traditions, but his career, he had 251 wins, 3.74 ERA, as I said earlier, and ended up making 6 All-Star Game appearances, was a World Series champion in 2009. That same year, he won the ALCS MVP, leading the Yankees to a 6-game series victory over the Angels. And he ended up winning he was a 2-time Major League wins leader in both 2009 and 2010. So definitely his best stretch of baseball was with the Yankees in those 2 years, arguably. And, CeCe really deserved to be in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame. I don't think you can argue with that. And he definitely deserved a lot of credit and recognition for that. So big shout out, big congratulations to CC Sabathia for an outstanding career for Major League Baseball. And then the last guy, and here's a guy that has had to wait for the full 10 years. And this is one of my all-time favorite players. Listen, Mariano Rivera is the greatest closer of all time. I'm willing to accept it. I accept that. But Billy Wagner was arguably my favorite closer growing up. He was a 5'6", 5'7". He was a pretty short guy. He was a left-hander that delivered the heat. Like, he was a 100-mile-per-hour fastball guy. Like, before there was Aroldis Chapman, there was Billy Wagner. The guy was lights out in Major League Baseball. He spent 16 years in the MLB, playing 9 seasons at least with the Houston Astros, and then had some stints with the Phillies, the Mets, the Boston Red Sox, and the Atlanta Braves. The story with Billy Wagner is a remarkable achievement. Now, I used to work at a Division III university. Billy Wagner was drafted from Major League Baseball in the first round from a Division III college, Ferrum College to be exact. And Ferrum College, I want to say, let me look it up here. I want to say Ferrum College is located in Ferrum, Virginia, as he's a Virginia kid. And Billy Wagner was a pitcher there. He wound up, getting drafted in baseball. He spent about 9 seasons with the Astros, and I used to enjoy going to Astros games early on. I always do when I get the chance. But, man, growing up, in the days where it was first in the Astrodome and then, of course, Minute Maid Park, which has since been changed to Daikin Park, and I'm not too happy about that. But, I'll hopefully get used to it at some point. But, every time it was the 9th inning and we were winning by 2 runs, Billy Wagner would always come in. And I'll tell you what, folks, there was a lot of hoopla. There was some hoopla over Billy Wagner's walk-up music when he came in. Because every time he would come in to the song Enter Sandman by Metallica, and every time I would hear this song, the place would go crazy, and Bob Ford, the announcer of the Astros, would always say, "Your attention, please. For the Astros, pitching for the 9th inning, number 13, Billy Wagner." A little bit of a Michael Buffer-esque kind of voice every time Billy Wagner would come in, and I was always very excited to see him pitch. Because, man, I tell you what, he had a great fastball and a great slider, changeup, and everything. He was just the man. When you saw him come into a game and you were winning, it was game over, pretty much. And Wagner, of course, was the guy in Houston for the first 9 seasons as well. Have to kind of close out the music there because it was going to get loud, and I don't know if you were going to hear me in all that music. But anyway, so yeah, every time Wagner would come in, he would always be lights out, and there were so many great moments. But when you look at the career of Billy Wagner, and I know there's been people that have said some questions about, well, why is he in the Hall of Fame and all that? And others are like, well, why did it take him 10 years to get into the Hall of Fame? Well, that's a very good question, but you look at his career, 7 times he made the All-Star game. He was the NL Rolex Relief Man of the Year award winner in 1999. He had a career ERA of 2.31 for 1,100 strikeouts and 422 saves in his career. And the funny thing about it is, when he was first called up to the Astros, he actually, he had been a starting pitcher throughout his career. But when he was called up, that's when they turned him into a closer. So Billy Wagner, clearly a guy that had to wait 10 years before he finally got the call to the Hall. And I mean, I've really felt like he deserved it because I don't know if you can think about all the great closers that have been in baseball. Like Mariano Rivera, Trevor Hoffman, you can argue the two best closers during the 1990s and the early 2000s. Billy Wagner was probably like number three to me. I mean, in my biased opinion, he was the best, but I obviously know the logic, professional, the realistic side of me knows that Rivera takes the cake all the time. But Billy Wagner clearly got into, a groove there when he was in Houston as well. And, there were some great moments throughout his career. He had, he would always come in, strike out guys to end a ball game with his fastball. And, my all-time favorite moment with Billy Wagner, and this is a really interesting story. So, June 11th, 2003, the Astros were in New York at Yankee Stadium to take on the Yankees. And that day, Roy Oswalt got the start, but after four batters, he got injured for some reason. He was injured and he just couldn't go. So they had to go to the bullpen, and it became one of those bullpen games for the Astros that day. But surprisingly, the pitchers of Pete Monroe, Kirk Saros, Brad Lidge, and Octavio Dotel were able to keep the Yankees off the score sheet and off the hit sheet. So through 8 innings, you had a no-hitter going here. The score was 8-0 Houston, so the Astros were going to win the game. But they had to go to Billy Wagner in the 9th inning because, this was an opportunity to make some history. Because the Yankees are a team that you don't no-hit, at least at Yankee Stadium. But they bring Billy Wagner in, and he struck out, I believe, Jorge Posada, and then Bubba Trammell, pinch hitter. And then the last guy, of course, was Hideki Matsui, who was really a guy that was coming into his own as a player. And Matsui grounded out to Bagwell. Bagwell flipped it to Wagner, and Wagner stepped on the bag. And that was when everybody was just so happy. I was so happy because I got to see the last out of a no-hitter live in person. And, man, that was a remarkable achievement. And then, interestingly enough, my dad took me to a auto dealership, and that was where all 6 pitchers, the guys that threw the no-hitter, were signing baseballs. And I was really excited. I actually got to, have a quick chat with Billy Wagner. I was a little nervous as a kid, but he autographed my baseball, as did the other pitchers, and then we took a picture. And I have to admit, I sort of ruined that baseball because I was really big into the movie The Rookie starring Dennis Quaid, and that was a baseball that I never should have messed around with. I should have kept it in glass, but I was young. I was dumb at that time, and I think my dad probably, I don't think he grounded me, but he wasn't too happy about that because he had spent all this time getting me to go get a baseball autographed by these 6 pitchers. And what did I do? I ruined it for him. And we had that baseball in glass case, and clearly there's evidence to suggest that it was ruined. So never play with an autographed baseball. I should have learned that lesson from The Sandlot when Scotty Smalls got his dad's autographed Babe Ruth baseball, and they had to get all that. They had to go through all that trouble just to get it back from the Beast in that sense. So I should have learned that lesson from watching that movie. But yeah, it was a remarkable time. I loved Billy Wagner, and I was sad to see him go to Philly at first, and then he ended up with the Mets, and then the Red Sox and the Braves. But anyway, I was talking about this story. There was a kind of a hoopla about Billy Wagner because, as I said earlier, he had his walk-up music was to Enter Sandman from Metallica, but that was also where Mariano Rivera. That was Mariano Rivera's song as well. And when he got to New York, when Billy Wagner went to New York to pitch for the Mets, there was a big hoopla about who really should be the rightful owner of the song Enter Sandman. People say, well, it should be Mariano Rivera, this and that. But to Mariano Rivera's credit, he said he didn't really care. And that if Billy wanted to go out to Enter Sandman, let him go out to Enter Sandman. And I think that's one of the reasons why I have such great respect for Rivera, because he's not a guy that likes to get in controversy in a way. So, yeah, but a real big day for Major League Baseball. You got 3 guys that made it to the Hall of Fame, and I'm very glad for all 3 of them, especially with Billy Wagner. But in a sense, a well-deserved honor from for Major League Baseball to get this one right. And there's definitely going to be some issues going down the years for other players that should they get into the Hall of Fame, should they not be in the Hall of Fame, how many votes. The thing with the Hall of Fame voting process that's so frustrating is you got guys that are making steady climbs every year. Like, they're gaining percentages, and you're thinking, okay, in the next couple of years they're going to get in. Well, next year they take a step backwards, and then it's like that's their only chance. They're never going to get out of this again. I really hate how baseball writers tend to be stubborn and arrogant with the way they voted, especially the ones in New York, because, look, anybody that played in New York and had a great career, you're getting in the Hall of Fame regardless, obviously. I mean, that's just the way it is. Unless you have a big impact, like unless you were a big name player. The same thing with all these small market guys. Like a guy like Todd Helton, who made it to the Hall of Fame after a while. Todd Helton played with the Colorado Rockies, but one of the reasons why he was held back was that because Colorado was known for its atmosphere, and all that with Coors Field, sometimes you wonder, were those home run balls really hit or, out of the ballpark, or was it just an unfair advantage because Colorado has to deal with that atmosphere type thing? And I don't think that's really fair. I think Todd Helton was deserving of getting to the Hall of Fame, and I'm glad he got into the Hall of Fame. Same thing with Joe Mauer and, Adrian Beltre. Those were the three guys I think that got in last year. So very happy to see Billy Wagner in the Hall of Fame, and I'm very glad to see, Ichiro and CC Sabathia as well. I'm a little bit weary about how the Hall of Fame voting is going to go for the next few years because I don't really trust those guys in the sense I have my personal reasons. I just think it's unfair that, a lot of these guys are, getting eliminated from the ballot, especially after their first year, which I think is wrong. And some guys really deserve to be on the ballot a little bit longer than that. But either way, it's a good day if you're an Astros fan, if you're a Mariners fan, or if you're a fan of the Yankees, the Guardians, and the Brewers, just to name a few teams. Same thing with the Mets, Braves, and Red Sox as well, and Phillies. I don't want to forget about those guys. Anyways, folks, that's my thoughts on the Hall of Fame selection for Major League Baseball. When we come back, though, we got to get into this topic conversation about the Kansas City Chiefs, whether or not this whole thing is... The whole thing with them and the referees is ridiculous, and how, my personal opinion, I think the way sports are viewed at this point could be an equation to how society is viewed at this point. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. Let me just first and foremost get this out of the way. So, obviously, I was unable to keep track of the AFC divisional game between the Texans and the Chiefs. I was on my way back from covering a game with our Lamar women's basketball team, which we won, by the way. But I was unable to keep track of that. And, I have to admit that after three quarters, like when I saw the score from time to time, after three quarters, the Texans were actually in the game. Like, they were battling the Chiefs really hard. I mean, sure, you can say that, there were some special teams mistakes in the process. The kicker, Kaimi Fairbairn, missed a field goal, and then he had another one blocked in a way. But the Texans were really in the game. But yet, Kansas City kind of proved why they were the two-time defending champions, and they showed why, in a sense. Look, I picked the Chiefs to win that game. It's hard for me to admit that, and it was hard for me to do that because I really wanted to see the Texans pull off an upset, shock everybody. But the thing is, the Texans were at a disadvantage. They didn't have some key players that, they really needed. Diggs was out with an ACL injury. Tank Dell was out with an ACL injury and more injuries, which unfortunately might keep him out for this upcoming season. And, the Texans just had some issues with the offensive line, which had plagued them all season long. And, defense played well, but there were times where they just couldn't quite get on track. And, it is what it is. Kansas City was a better team. And I know I said one of my wish lists was a playoff matchup with those guys, and we got it, but it didn't end up the way we wanted to. I still wish that we get a rematch with Kansas City because personally I think that there's no way that this is a one-time thing. There's no way that I see the Texans and the Chiefs, having one playoff matchup between C.J. Stroud and Patrick Mahomes, and that be it. Because I don't think that's fair. I think we need to see more of those matchups as well, and in a sense. But so I just want to get that out of the way first and foremost. And then I also want to say, look, I don't hate the Kansas City Chiefs. I have great respect for them. I know it's hard for me to say I want to lose to them, but I respect those guys. I respect their fan base, and I respect all the players that they got. They built themselves a team to be a dynasty in a way. And I know I joked in the past about how the Chiefs were like the Astros in a way, except for a few differences. But you can't deny the success of the Kansas City Chiefs. Let's put it this way. But with all that being said, we have an issue that we need to discuss. And I know Kansas City fans are very sick and tired of hearing this. I'm sure they're dealing with this all the time because they want to talk about what did Kansas City do right instead of why, the other team lost. But I don't think we can hide the issue anymore. Clearly, there seems to be a biased case of officiating that tends to favor the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I'm not one to suggest that Kansas City gets all the unfair breaks and everything, but I will say that if you're going to play the Kansas City Chiefs, particularly in Arrowhead Stadium, you have to overcome the psychological factor that there's going to be a bunch of calls that are going to go against you that's going to be lenient towards the Chiefs. And, you have to overcome that. That's just the way it is at times. But what really bothers me is that there seems to be a lot of great calls that have gone on for Kansas City Wade. Now, I really feel like for sports, when it comes to referees, if let's say you have 10 calls per game, there should at least be a 5-5 balance, or let's say 6 for one team and 4 for another team at least. But I think that's really fair. Like if we had a 50-50 balance, 51-49 or 60-40 at least, I think that's fair. I mean, it may be bad for the team that has 60% of calls go against them, but hey, at least it's not like overly biased in a way. But there were like 9 to 10 calls, supposedly, that went against the Houston Texans in that game that really killed any chance of them to try to win. Now, look, the Texans did make mistakes, special teams. They couldn't kick the field goals. There was a situation where one of the players forced a fumble, and in a celebratory mood, he took off his helmet and just, lost his mind for a moment. But that was a big penalty. You can't do that. But some of the things, I don't know what else to say. Clearly, there seems to be some bias that goes against the Kansas City Chiefs. And a lot of times, fans are upset and they say, well, the reason why, the Kansas City Chiefs, are winning these games is because of these controversial calls. Now, I'm not saying that the Kansas City Chiefs, that's always the case, but you have to kind of factor in that there has been some fortunate breaks going against them. And I think that is just the real sad part of this truth. Look, the Kansas City Chiefs are going to get some breaks, and they're going to get some calls against them. Like, I'm watching some highlights of some clips of some calls. Like, week 1 against the Baltimore Ravens, there should have been a false start called on Jawan Taylor at a pivotal moment, and then there should have been a holding call that was called on Kingsley Suamataia, which, again, that was a game where the Ravens were right within striking distance. They had a chance to win, but the receiver stepped 1 foot out of bounds. And now here's another one that happened in that game. Steve Spagnuolo, he called a timeout, which was against the rules. I don't think an assistant coach is supposed to do that, or a defensive coordinator is supposed to do that. I think it's supposed to be the head coach, but he was the defensive coordinator, and he called a timeout, and you're not supposed to do that. And, look, there's a lot of things that happen during those games, and I think fans are getting sick and tired and frustrated by this as well. But it's almost like, look, the Kansas City Chiefs are the media darlings in the NFL. You cannot deny that. The best quarterback in the game is Patrick Mahomes. He's already won 3 Super Bowls. He's looking to win a fourth and looking to make history while doing so. You'll have Travis Kelce, who is arguably the greatest tight end to ever play the game. He's in a relationship with the biggest pop star sensation in Taylor Swift. And there are a lot of Swifties that, seem to follow her like a religious cult. The same thing with all the Justin Bieber fans when he was a big deal in the early days. Like, it happens. Like, a pop star sensation, it's just one of those things that happens in a way. I think the NFL wanted to capitalize on bringing in all the fans of Taylor Swift and all fans of music, and then you had this great team that is in the midst of a dynastic run starting to, captivate fans. Like, look, you have a lot of Chiefs fans that are like bandwagon fans, and every great team has bandwagon fans. I know that personally. But you also had this Hallmark Channel movie which was surrounding the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, it had nothing to do with any of the players, but the fact is that you just had this one super fan who falls in love with someone that just happens to be working with the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, it's getting ridiculous. And you sometimes wonder, well, why didn't the Patriots get a movie like that? Oh, wait, they did get a movie, but it was about four 90-year-old grandmas going to Super Bowl 51 when Tom Brady pulled a comeback, and Rob Gronkowski was actually in the movie. I mean, gee whiz. I didn't see that movie, but from what I heard, it was terrible. So, and I don't think the grandmas were 90 in that movie as well. But yeah, I mean, look, there's nothing you can do at the moment. The Chiefs are the biggest professional sports team, the most successful sports team as of right now. But it has gotten me worried about where the fairness lies. Like, with all the other teams that are striving to compete, where is the fairness in all these teams? Like, you look at the Buffalo Bills. They're having a great season. They're going to play the Chiefs in the AFC Championship with an opportunity to knock them off, and we'll get into that in a while. You got the Baltimore Ravens, who had Lamar Jackson, and, the Ravens, they've been a team that has played well in the regular season but have lost in the postseason. You also had, you have these other teams. And then you look at the NFC. The Eagles are still a threat. I mean, the Detroit Lions, they had a disappointing playoff exit. And then, of course, you have, the Dallas Cowboys. But look, the Cowboys are just, they're a big brand, but they're not doing well on the football field. And that is something that is, I think that's got to be sickening to them in this stage. But the biggest problem that I have is, when is the NFL going to say, look, we have this great team, yes, but we cannot let this saga of officiating get out of hand? When are they going to do something about this? Like, I'm not saying you're going to eliminate all these controversial calls entirely. Like, that's just part of the game. That's part of accepting it. But there has to be a right balance. There has to be a way to have the officials who make some bad calls, who have multiple bad calls, on the grading report. And if they fail by your standards, they shouldn't even be allowed to work in the NFL, at least for a while. You should suspend them. Take away a paycheck for them. Let them go back to therapy, or let them take a class that says, hey, you can't do that. Like, this is why you can't do this. You're not so good. It's funny. Going back to the Hall of Fame segment, the Baseball Hall of Fame segment real fast. And I know this might sound kind of bad in a way, but I was watching a documentary. Trust me, folks, this is something that pertains to the NFL. But I was watching a documentary about how in Japan there is I don't know what they call it, but there was like a sort of punishment for some classes where if a train driver were to make a mistake, driving the train, and if he had at least one mistakes or multiple mistakes, he would be sent to this course, which he would be, have to go through, and it would be rigorous, it would be strict and disciplined. You would be berated by your supervisors, and you would also, have to write essays, and you have to get it right and right and right until you finally, get it right. And it would take maybe a month or so or a week or so to go through that process. And sometimes it can really have a negative effect on you. But as sad as it is, I was thinking about it, and I'm just like, why can't the NFL do something about it? Why can't they have all the referees go back to class to talk about, okay, here's why it wasn't like that. Because going back to the Texans game, there was a play where Mahomes was sliding and you had two defenders for the Texans collide with each other, and for some reason they called a penalty on them. Like, those two guys didn't even hit at Mahomes. You could say, oh, they got him just a wee little bit. No, you dummy. You had two players that hit at each other at the same time, and Mahomes wasn't even involved. And then the thing with Mahomes is he's gotten to the point where he's becoming a bit of a prima donna. Like, you see that play where he's running out of bounds and he's trying to decide, oh, should I slide or should I just step out of bounds? Like, if you're out of bounds, that's fine. But when Mahomes is out of bounds, the guy just touches him and Mahomes just flops. And Troy Aikman and Joe Buck were clearly not happy about it. Like, I mean, you listening to all the calls that they had gone through, and I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous and absolutely insane to even think about that. I mean, for Troy Aikman, a guy that played in Major League Baseball, and the same thing with, Joe Buck, who's seen it all. Like, these are guys that I'm sure that loved Mahomes at first, but now they kind of started to maybe turn on Mahomes just a little bit just because of all that stuff. But man, I mean, the thing that's really sad with, the thing that's really frustrating with the referees, there's controversy, and it just seems like the refereeing situation is getting out of hand. Like, you have the NFL that's finding all these players left and right for minor related things. It's not that they're finding players, they're finding them lots of money. Like, an average player might have half his salary taken away because of a minor, thing, like a minor taunt or something like that. Like, come on, NFL, this is ridiculous. And it's not just with the NFL, but it's the NBA that's making these mistakes. It's also the same thing with baseball. I mean, sure, baseball has a replay system. Same thing with football. But do the umpires and do the referees really trust that system in a way that's supposed to help them out in this regard? Or is there more to it that is making the calls favorable to the team that is widely recognized, that is a big marketed brand, or in the case of the Kansas City Chiefs, a team from a medium-sized market at best, I'll put it that way, but has a really great sports tradition that for 50 years after winning their first Super Bowl in 1969, didn't win another Super Bowl until they drafted Mahomes, and then they won 3 Super Bowls in a 5-year span, possibly going for 4 for 6. So, where's the fairness in all this? Like, I'm not saying Kansas City is, like, I sympathize with the fans. I'm sure if I were a fan of the Chiefs, I would be sick and tired of having to talk about this, and instead I point out the flaws in the other team. Here's why you didn't beat us. Here's why you messed up, like you lost the game. Here's why we won the game, and you lost. And that's the frustrating thing, because Kansas City, for the longest time after that Super Bowl win in 1969, didn't really have anything to cheer about sports-wise. The Royals were a great franchise. I mean, yeah, Kansas City Royals had some great years. They won a World Series in 1985. But the Chiefs, they really were snake-bitten for a while. And then, of course, look at them now. So, it just makes you wonder. I mean, the great teams, of course, are going to find ways to win games regardless of circumstances. But what really concerns me is that we're living in a situation where no matter what, the big marketed teams will always have advantages over small marketed teams, and that's unfair. Like, you see what the Dodgers are doing in the offseason? They're signing all these players left and right. I mean, they get Shohei Ohtani for a big deal, and look what happened to them last year. They get Roki Sasaki, this pitcher from Japan who's expected to contribute to that team, when they already have another Japanese pitcher on the team. And, I mean, they're just getting players left and right. They're spending all this money. Now, it's frustrating, but after talking to my brother about it, he's like, well, all that's going to come back to bite him later on. It might take some time, but hey, it's going to affect them in a sense, because they're using up all that money when they clearly could be using some of the picks some of the issues to help develop their players to get themselves back. My brother may be right, my brother may be wrong, but hey, I'm hoping he's right. And again, I don't have any issues with the Dodgers except for other factors, but we'll move past that for the time being. But you see the point, the Dodgers are becoming a villains here. And the Kansas City Chiefs are becoming the villains of the NFL. I've been a fan of a villainous team. I hated that, but I'm just going to say it. We didn't get the benefit of having calls go for us all the time. And it's because we were a medium-sized market team. I don't want to use small market because clearly Houston is not a small market. It's not a big market like Dallas, Philadelphia, New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago. It's just not that recognizable. And to me, I'm concerned that with all the refereeing stuff that's happening in the world of sports these days, we're going to be living in a society where if you're a fan of a small market team, you're going to have to accept the fact that unless something great happens for you, unless there's that once-in-a-lifetime achievement thing, you're not going to, maybe see a championship. And that's not fair because it's always going to be the big market teams that's going to take advantage of opportunities. And I think the ratings-wise, it would be a successful thing. Now, the last World Series, I don't think was a great World Series. I mean, sure, the Dodgers were 1 out away from losing Game 1. That could have maybe turned the whole thing around, and yet they ended up winning that game and won the series in 5. But they were 3-0 up on the Yankees. But I feel like at some point, there's going to come a time when all the small market teams and all the medium-sized market teams are going to take advantage of the opportunities and win championships. I feel confident with my Houston sports teams, and I've seen 4 championships, or 8 if you want to include the Houston Comets of the WNBA, but they're not in existence anymore. My biggest thing is, are the sports teams sports leagues going to take advantage, cover the medium-sized market teams? Like, look, in the NBA, the Oklahoma City Thunder is the best team in the Western Conference. The Cleveland Cavaliers are the best team in the Eastern Conference. You got the Rockets that are third or second in the Western Conference. Memphis is having a great year. And then, obviously, you look at the NBA, the Eastern Conference, Boston's still a big threat. I mean, the Knicks are having a good year. And then you have Victor Wembanyama, who is potentially the next biggest thing. He's playing for a Spurs team that, mind you, they're kind of in the mix or in the pack in a way, but you should be starting to cover him, and instead you're still stuck covering LeBron James and the Golden State Warriors for all I care about. And the Warriors are out of playoff contention for the time being, or play-in contention for right now. The Lakers are the 6th seed in the NBA, and why aren't you spending more time focusing on all the teams at the top? It boggles my mind sometimes, and I feel like for all the sports fans of the Buffalo Bills, fans of the San Diego Padres, fans of, I don't know, like any team, the Minnesota teams, the Atlanta teams, Cleveland, and, the Houston teams, for all I care, it's almost like it's almost like we're the Charlie Brown of sports teams, and that's kind of a bad comparison because Charlie Brown hardly wins anything. But I like to think of us as the main protagonist of the 1980s teen movie, like Back to the Future or, I don't know, some other classic 1980s movies. I'm sure y'all probably know some, like when John Cusack or, Michael J. Fox or just all these actors in a way, or, Can't Buy Me Love. Like, we're the main nerd, the main protagonist of a 1980s teen movie, but instead of the happy ending where we conquer the bullies, we get the girl, or all that stuff, there's nothing like that. It's just, I don't know, like it's just the reality of that situation. And I know this sounds like I'm ranting on for a lot of things, but my biggest worry is our society, what we believe is going to happen, the dreams of our championship aspirations for our sports teams, no matter what team we root for, is going to be affected because we're not part of the cool club. And I just don't think that's right. Like, how many years from now, how many people will remember let's say the St. Louis Blues after winning the 2019 Stanley Cup Finals. How many people will remember the 2015 Kansas City Royals? People in Kansas City will remember them, but what about the rest of the world? Will they remember those championship runs? What about the 2005 White Sox? That team won a World Series after a long time. I throw in my Houston teams in there, and I'm sure a lot of people will hopefully come around to accepting it. But, it's just one of those things that it's just so frustrating. I don't know. I guess maybe unless you were born in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Philadelphia, Dallas, or wherever city, and you have teams that win championships, guess what? You're going to get a lot of recognition. You're going to be part of the gentleman's club, or the ladies' club for that matter. And for everyone else, sorry, you can't get access to it. Well, the way I see it, I'm not playing that game. I refuse to play by the rules that it's a major media market. And man, I wish I was owning all my Houston teams. We'd be ruining lives and winning championships. And we'll spread the wealth to all the small market teams, of course. But man, somebody has to take charge. Okay, this is just me rambling on about stupid stuff that's probably not going to happen or will happen. Maybe it will happen, but not in the way that I hope it does. But yeah, bottom line is the referees and the officiating, I don't know. It's getting out of hand. It's getting ridiculous. There has to be something that the NFL needs to do to fix all those things, to get those issues correct. Because trust me, NFL, you don't want to lose your viewers. You don't want to lose your viewers. The viewership is down. Like people are saying the NBA viewership is down in a way. And I don't know. You don't want to lose all the people that spent countless days admiring the sport that they love, and yet they turn away because they feel that there is some added force, whether fair or unfair, whether biased or unbiased. And this is why I feel bad for Kansas City Chiefs fans in particular, because as great of a team as the Chiefs are, and they will go down as one of the greatest of all time, there's a narrative hanging around them. And I don't think it's fair, but you know what? The Patriots had this narrative that they cheated all the time. And, that's just the way it is. They have to deal with it, even if it's not entirely true. It is what it is. And I just sometimes think that we need to do better as a sports society to spread the love, spread the coverage in a way. But, they hate you one day, they love you the next, and vice versa. So I think the Kansas City Chiefs should not be remembered as a team that had some unfair help from the referees, because they'll tell you we did all the right things, we played well, and yeah, there were some mistakes that were done on the other side, but we took advantage of those. But at some point, somebody's going to end up beating them, and they're going to have to overcome, they're going to have to accept the fact, or that team that does beat the Chiefs, they're going to have to overcome the referees and all that stuff. And hopefully it's the Texans next year. But we'll talk more about that another time. But in the meantime, now we're going to step aside. We're going to quickly talk about the championship games. I'm going to give my predictions for who I think is going to win those games. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. It's time we discuss the championship games, which are about to be played this Sunday. And while we can honestly say that one particular match, or one particular game was kind of to be expected, the other one pretty surprising. And let's talk about the surprising match first. We're talking, of course, about the Philadelphia Eagles, who are going to be hosting the Washington Commanders. And I got to tell you what, I was surprised that Washington not only defeated the Detroit Lions, but they did so in convincing fashion. They put up 45 points. Like, Jaden Daniels, I mean, let's be real. Best rookie season ever. Even C.J. Stroud himself said it. Best rookie season ever, and I don't think you can argue with the numbers that he put up with. Like, Jaden Daniels should be the rookie of the year, and he will be the first rookie quarterback in some time to lead a team to the AFC Championship game. And I think he became the first one to do it since, I want to say, Ben Roethlisberger back in 2004. There might have been someone else that did it since then, but that's the only one I can think back far off. So, but anyways, folks, NFC Championship game between the Washington Commanders and the Philadelphia Eagles, an NFC Championship rivalry that has now taken on a life of its own, as this is a third meeting between the Commanders and the Eagles. You normally don't see a matchup between the Commanders and the Eagles in the NFL season as of late because, well, the Eagles have been contenders for some time while Washington has had some struggles. But, man, what a great turnaround by Washington. Like, last year, they finished having the second pick in the NFL draft, and now they are one win away from potentially getting themselves back to the Super Bowl for the first time since 1991. And that year, the formerly known Washington Redskins defeated the Buffalo Bills 37-24. Mark Rippon, of course, was named the Super Bowl MVP in that game. So Washington feeding off momentum here after pulling off the biggest upset of the season, defeating the Detroit Lions 45-31. They have an opportunity to get themselves back to the Super Bowl, and Jaden Daniels has, I want to say, the opportunity to be the first quarterback to start in a game, unless I'm thinking about another guy that did so for the Rams back a while back. He was the third-string quarterback, Vince Ferragamo, and no, he was not a rookie in 1977. He was just a third-string quarterback. So, yeah, I wasn't really sure, but Jaden Daniels has the opportunity to be the first quarterback as a rookie to appear in the Super Bowl, and that's something that I think a lot of fans are going to watch. The bad news, though, is that the Commanders have to go up to Philadelphia to take on the Philadelphia Eagles in a very cold-like environment. And, well, let's just say that Philly is a hard place to win in all of the NFL. They're one of the hardest places to win. You got to go up there. You have to deal with the crazy fans. You have to deal with, an environment in a sense. And the last time the two teams met this season, the Eagles ended up winning 26-18 over Washington. So in a way, the Eagles are going to be favored because they're the number 2 seed, while the Commanders are the number 6 seed. And usually you don't see the number 6 seed in an NFC Championship game of that magnitude. But the Eagles do have a little bit of concern regarding the potential injury to Jalen Hurts, who suffered an injury on his left knee in the game against the Rams. And the Eagles barely won their game against the Rams game, 28-22. So there is going to be a little bit of concern over Jalen Hurts and his ability to play, but that's the reason why the Eagles went out and got Saquon Barkley, who has compiled a playoff high 324 rushing yards and 6.4 yards per carry this postseason, and he has definitely been the best running back. Like, Saquon Barkley has been the biggest difference for the Philadelphia Eagles this season, and Washington will definitely have their hands full on trying to stop him in this game. I think Philadelphia will be able to run the ball very well on Saquon Barkley in this game. Now, the Washington Commanders, of course, are playing lights out. Jaden Daniels has managed to show some uncanny poise and composure for the Commanders, as there's really no question about that he's a remarkable quarterback. Now, it's only his rookie season. How he'll do in his second season will remain to be seen, but you have to think that what he's done has given Washington fans excitement for next season. Now, it's going to be a bit of a challenge, and it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out in that regard. So, Washington will definitely have a great quarterback to watch out for, try to protect all throughout the game, but I got to tell you what, this is a game that I really think you can say that there are no losers, because on one hand, the Commanders win because they got to this NFC Championship game when nobody thought that they were going to improve or be a playoff team in that sense. It's such a remarkable achievement for them this season. On the other hand, you have the Philadelphia Eagles, who are looking to get back to the Super Bowl after losing 2 years ago to the same Kansas City Chiefs team. They're obviously better in the running game, and that's something that I think is going to benefit them very well. Passing game-wise, not quite the advantage over the Washington Commanders, even though A.J. Brown has had 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons. But, this is an Eagles team that is very run-oriented, and Washington, of course, has passed for 283 yards per game this season, or in the playoffs, and that's something that is probably going to help them out. However, the Eagles, they have a better offensive line, they have a better defensive line, according to odds makers, and that's something that the game is basically won in the trenches, and I think Philadelphia will be able to benefit from having a strong defensive effort. I think it's clear to say that this will probably be a very close game, but I got Philly winning this one. They're at home. They have a better run-oriented system. Jaden Daniels might have a touchdown or so, but he might struggle in this game. And, he'll show some poise. He'll show some composure, but it would be a huge miracle if Washington were to get to the Super Bowl. And that would be something that I think a lot of fans would want to see. However, Jaden Daniels, he had a really great season, and I think a lot of fans would definitely want to wish him well throughout the rest of his career, but I just don't know if that's going to be enough to knock off the Philadelphia Eagles. So I'm going to say Philadelphia wins this one 27-21 at least. So Philly gets to the Super Bowl. Now we have a rematch. It's the Buffalo Bills versus the Kansas City Chiefs. And folks, there is not a bigger rivalry in all of sports or in all football than the Chiefs and the Bills. We could talk about the epic clashes of the regular season. We could talk about the epic clashes during the postseason. But clearly, the Bills and the Chiefs are arguably the two best teams in all of the NFL at this point. So, for the 4th time, these two teams are meeting each other. But the pressure does appear to be on the Bills. They have to go to Kansas City. And their last 3 times they played Kansas City in the playoffs have not ended well. They lose 2020, but, it was a young Bills team that went up against a Chiefs team that had won the Super Bowl the previous year. The following season, the two teams met up in one of the greatest games of all time, the epic clash where you had at least 24 points scored between the two teams in the final seconds. As, Buffalo took the lead. Kansas City had Tyreek Hill. He ran in for a touchdown on a great reception. Then Buffalo scored again. 13 seconds left. You're thinking this is Buffalo's game. It's game over. But Mahomes and Kelsey said, not so fast. They get in position for a field goal. They tied the game. And then the overtime rules, which at the time were you have to score a touchdown to win the game. And Buffalo and Kansas City, of course, won the toss. They get the ball. They go down the field. They score a touchdown. They win the game. Another great game. Another great finish. Kansas City won. Then last year, another tightly fought game. Came down to the wire. Buffalo needed a field goal to tie the game. The two infamous words, wide right, Buffalo lost, and Kansas City went on to win the Super Bowl. So this rivalry is now compared to what the Astros were to the Yankees, what the Boston Bruins were to the Toronto Maple Leafs, what the Golden State Warriors were to the Houston Rockets. It's a big rivalry. But it's becoming a one-sided rivalry. And the only way it can really be a legitimate, a true iconic rivalry is if the Buffalo Bills were to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And, we've seen Buffalo do that in the regular season. But the regular season is not the postseason. It's just not. And that's something that Kansas City knows very well. Same thing with the Buffalo fans. They know very well. It's going to be a really, really dog fight of a game. And that's why that game is going to be the nightcapper, the main entree. And this is a game that I think will be a defining moment in the legacy of Josh Allen. Because Josh Allen this season has arguably been playing as the MVP. And, the great game against the Ravens, it was back and forth, and Buffalo ended up winning that game, and they were able to get themselves, to the AFC Championship game. Of course, it required a drop pass from Mark Andrews of the Ravens to get Buffalo there. But it's a game that I feel like Josh Allen still has something to prove. We know how good he is in the postseason or the regular season. Postseason, a little bit different. Like Josh Allen to Patrick Mahomes at this stage is like Peyton Manning to Tom Brady before 2006. Remember, Tom Brady had owned Peyton Manning in the first couple years of the rivalry. Like, they met each other during the playoffs twice, and Tom Brady got the better of Peyton Manning both times. Well, in 2006, when the Colts were hosting the AFC Championship game, the Colts ended up getting one back at the Patriots, and that seemed to have changed the rivalry in a way. So, of course, keep in mind, the Bills did end Kansas City's undefeated bid in Week 11, and Allen that game had 262 passing yards, 1 touchdown, an interception, and 55 rushing yards, as well as 1 touchdown rushing for the win. So, in a way, this is the game. This has the makings to be an epic Super Bowl clash, pending, of course, that the two remaining teams are equally matched up with each other. And this game, I think, will have a lasting impact on the legacies. Will this be the final opportunity that the Buffalo Bills have to try to knock off the Kansas City Chiefs? And if they don't, the legacy of that Bills team as maybe the best challenge that Kansas City has had, but maybe another team might have the opportunity to do so? Or will the Kansas City Chiefs be denied their opportunity to win a third straight championship? Something that no NFL team has ever done when the Super Bowl era started. The Packers, when they won their 2 Super Bowls, they didn't make the playoffs in '68. The Miami Dolphins, they lost in the AFC divisional round to the Raiders. The Steelers, when they, in their first back-to-back championship season, they lost in the championship game the third year to the Raiders. You then had the 49ers, who lost in the NFC Championship game to the Giants. You also had the Cowboys, who lost to the 49ers. And, of course, like the Patriots lost in the playoffs. And, it's one of those things. Sometimes when you have a team that's won back-to-back championships and you get to the championship game when you're 1 win away from a remarkable achievement to try to go for 3 in a row, you get blindsided and you get down in the dumps because the team ends up losing a tough game. I think Buffalo will definitely be more motivated to play this game, but I also think that Kansas City Chiefs, after all this season, after all what they've gone through, they understand what the challenge they have is. And Kansas City, the one thing they do very well, even when they aren't playing their best football, they find ways to win games. And that's what you have to have in the playoffs. So as far as I'm concerned, I want to see the Buffalo Bills win this game. I want to see them go to the Super Bowl and at least get a championship for that city of Buffalo. But I also want Kansas City to win and three-peat. Because selfishly, I want another shot at them next year in the playoffs, being a Texans fan myself. But as far as my predictions for this game goes, oh boy, this is a tough one. I'm going to go ahead and say that Kansas City will find a way to win it again. And I think it'll be a very close game. I think this game will come down to the wire. No overtime finishes. No 13-second dramatics. Just a regular game-winning drive from Patrick Mahomes to find Travis Kelce or one of his other receivers to win the game. So, that being said, Super Bowl 59, my prediction will be a rematch of Super Bowl 57 between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles. But hey, it can happen. Things can happen. You never know. So, with all that being said, that is going to conclude my snowy edition of Crocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock. I hope you guys enjoyed my thoughts on some things. And if you're listening in from the South, I hope you guys are staying warm. Remember, you can listen to this podcast at my YouTube channel, KWCLINE91, and also to Spotify and Podbean. That's right, folks. It's going to be a real exciting next couple of days. Hopefully we can warm up here and get back to civilization. Man, I don't want to turn into a caveman. I don't want to be like Leonardo DiCaprio in that movie that he won, The Revenant, I think it was called. Yeah, The Revenant. But I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be like a caveman when I come out of this apartment finally. So all that said, hope you guys are staying warm. I will see you guys next time on another episode of Crocking, Locking, and Dropping.